accelerated summer classes provided by our school. It's meant to finish one whole year course within 10 weeks of summer with school credits. They can be good. It just depends on what other options you have available in the summer. Oftentimes, those would conflict potentially with things like a set summer program for something related to your major, or you could take courses at a university's pre-college, or take, even like community college classes. Uh, you know, it depends largely on what you're trying to do. If there's a certain course that's maybe a prerequisite to graduate and you just want to get rid of it during the summer, one possible advantage to doing it that way is that you could free up a slot for the upcoming year that you could take a more competitive class, like a possible AP class, for instance. I think that would be a good reason to go ahead and go with that option if you wanted to kind of free up a slot to be able to take something else that you want to take later on. Okay. But it can be a good option. It just depends on whether options you have available in the summer. These days, with a number of schools, for instance, now requiring the SAT, you might also want to consider that as a factor. Having to take SAT or ACT preparation during the summer because many schools are now starting to require them. Okay, next question. I want to go to law school for graduate school, but I'm not interested in political science major for undergrad. Should I do English, psychology, or philosophy? But I'm not sure if I change my mind and eventually plan to get a job instead of going to law school after undergraduate, whether these three majors can support me enough to get a good job. That's a good question. And to be frank, you can get a good job. Obviously, like it just depends. Obviously, it may not be as high paying as a more technical job. Obviously, like fields like computer science, engineering, those tend to be the highest paying jobs. But if you wanted a job that could be pretty good for law, I mean, you could go for something like econ. Economics is a good option as well. You could potentially also double major or minor with something that you think might be able to get you, more skill sets on your resume to be able to get a job if you decide to wait a little bit before you decide to do law school. I would say something like data science would be good so that you could potentially go for like analyst roles, even if you're going for something like political science or one of these other fields, right? So having multiple skill sets, keep in mind a major would really only account for maybe something like 8 to 12 of the courses that you would take in a typical 4-year college career, right? So in 4 years, if let's say, for example, you're assuming that a school is based on a semester system, that's on average like what, 4 courses per semester? So you would end up getting about 32 courses for the entire 4-year college career. So if only about 8 to 12 of them were related to your major, that still gives you a lot of flexibility to be able to pursue things like a second major, a minor, to give you a little bit more flexibility moving forward. Okay, next is may I have one recommendation letter from my public speaking mentor who is a university professor? Absolutely, right? Just keep in mind though that there's a separate category for that. When you're asking for rec letters down the line for colleges, you would want one or two of your high school teachers to be able to submit because that's a set category for the application. Your high school guidance counselor or college counselor will also be another slot. And many schools will have an optional one or two, sometimes more slots for you to add what's called an other recommender, which could be someone who knows you from a different capacity, like a coach, a mentor of some sort, a supervisor from an internship. Those are all viable options. But like you can't use that professor to take up the spot that should have been for a teacher if that is a requirement of the school, though. So it's a separate category, but absolutely yes. Okay. Next, 11th grade student has not applied for summer school, but one is waiting for SIP, which is a summer internship, right? What should the student focus on this summer to help student apply for Ivy League colleges? Well, I mean, SIP can be a good option because it's gotten more competitive in recent years. If they're on the wait list and they happen to get a really good project, it can help them to be more competitive for things like an Ivy League school. It just depends largely on the nature of the actual internship itself, obviously. That could be a good option to consider if you're aiming a highly selective school like a top 20 or top 25 school. Next, is it too late to apply for summer research programs now? Um, it tends to be pretty late around this time of year because normally things in May or June The more competitive summer programs are usually going to be the ones that are due in like January, February, or March, right? So there are some options available if you still want to do something research oriented, but obviously, like the selectivity of the program won't necessarily be as competitive. Okay. Next, is physics easier than math to apply? Does physics plus CS is easier than just CS for physics itself to apply? That depends largely on the school, I would say. Depends on the program. It also depends on how strong your background is for either math or physics. I wouldn't necessarily say that physics or math is necessarily easier or harder. Most schools, physics and math will be part of their College of Arts and Sciences. They won't be housed in their engineering school. So I would say roughly about equal, right? Anything with CS becomes harder. Obviously, pure CS itself would be definitely harder than a physics combo with CS, right? Pure CS is probably just about the hardest major to get into these days, just FYI. Okay, next is my daughter got a 780 in English, 750 in math for her SAT, but she wants to go for a CS major. We're concerned how the admissions offices would look at it. I think that's really still a really solid score overall. If there is still time to take another crack at the SAT to try to raise up that math score, that might be worthwhile. Um, yeah, I mean, there's probably still a fall test date, I'm assuming, right? So if you want to try one more try, many schools will probably super score these, which means they'll take the higher subject score for each sitting that you take. So if you're already at a good place with a 780, if you spent the summer maybe just working with a tutor or taking a class to raise that 750, I think that's worth one more shot, to be honest, especially if you're going to go for a more quantitative or technical field like computer science for sure. Okay. All right. Next is my son is currently in eighth grade. I heard earlier that a majority Asian males want to study computer science. My son is one of them. Should I encourage him to explore different interests? Because I don't know how he can stand out among other people. Well, I mean, if that's really his passion, I think eighth grade gives you sufficient time to really start to build up a track record of what you can do to stand out in terms of computer science, of course, right? But normally, what I suggest for computer science is that there are two ways to make yourself distinct, right? You can either be head and shoulders better than a lot of people, which means maybe going for things like computing Olympiad type of activities, or maybe participating in hackathons, or just being able to actually demonstrate your coding abilities, right? Either through research or through doing things like developing your own apps or programs or websites. Or you could just be more well-rounded in some senses, right? So if you excel in other fields as well to make you more distinct, that could also be another way to stand out relative to some other students. Okay, next is sending a super score to MIT or Caltech. Does it look bad or okay? No, you're fine. Yeah, I mean, most of those schools will allow you to super score anyway, so you're fine either way, right? So there's nothing wrong with sending multiple test scores. They know it's normal. Okay. So we got a couple last questions, and I guess that'll be it for the evening. If there's only bandwidth for either a college math course at a community college or doing a math related research program project in the summer, which one would you recommend? Um, it depends on the nature of the research, I suppose, right? It also depends on whether or not the student has had perfect grades so far. If there is a question about their track record academically, I would say maybe taking the community college class would be better in the sense that it might allow them to have a slightly stronger, like it boosts the academic aspect a little bit more. But if they're already a straight A student, then probably the research might be a better option potentially there. Okay. Okay, so last one here. The student is currently in 11th grade and will apply to college this October. What can he do this summer to help him apply for a dream college? Some of the stuff we mentioned, of course, doing some, like potentially if there is a research program available, that might be good depending on the major. Taking a couple of college classes always looks good. If that's not available, they can always maybe try to do an internship somewhere. It doesn't have to be research oriented. Sometimes even getting a summer job is really good because it like makes a student look like really responsible and mature, right? You could do combinations of those, right? You can take one or two college level classes and still have time to maybe volunteer, do an internship, or get a job, right? I would say at this stage, obviously, like doing things like summer programs are going to be Probably it's a little late in the game for that, just because most programs are going to be already filled up by now, or the ones that are still accepting spots may not be as competitive as the ones that are due earlier. Okay. All right. So thank you, everyone. These are wonderful questions. I hope you found the information helpful, and I'll see you again next week.